Chapter 2. Growth, Development and Happiness. Happiness is a result of creating strong social foundations, for which it is time to build social trust and healthy lives, not guns and walls. Introduction. Similar to seers and philosophers, economists were also party to humans' quest for a better tomorrow. We have been a witness to a number of notions coming in from the literature of economics in this area, starting with a very humble and layman's word like progress to technical terms like growth, development, and human development. With greater dependence on the idea of the economic man, the world created immense wealth in the post-war decades. It was in the 1980s that social scientists started finer studies in the area of mankind's actions, finally challenging the very idea of the economic man, rational man. Thus starts mankind's urge to introspect the lives of humanity on the planet Earth. Meanwhile, humanity was faced with an unique riddle of climate change. By now, courtesy the UNO, the world has the World Happiness Report. Progress. Progress is a general term frequently used by experts to denote betterment or improvement in anything. In economics, the term was used for a long time to show the positive movement in the lives of people and in an economy. It had both quantitative and qualitative aspects to it. After a point of time, some economists started using all the three terms, progress, growth, and development, interchangeably to mean almost the same thing. But it was only during the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s that a clear meanings of these terms really evolved. The term progress became a general term with no specific meaning in economics or denoting both growth and development. But growth and development were allotted their clear-cut meanings. Economic growth. A term coming from the life sciences, growth in economics means economic growth. An increase in economic variables over a period of time is economic growth. The term can be used in an individual case, or in the case of an economy, or for the whole world. The most important aspect of growth is its quantifiability, i.e., one can measure it in absolute terms. All the units of measurement may be applied, depending upon the economic variable, where growth is being studied. We have a few examples. 1. An economy might have been able to see growth in food production during a decade which could be measured in tons. 2. The growth of road network in an economy might be measured for a decade, or any period in miles or kilometers. 3. Similarly, the value of the total production of an economy might be measured in currency terms, which means the economy is growing. 4. Per capita income for an economy might be measured in monetary terms over a period. We may say that economic growth is a quantitative progress. To calculate the growth rate of an economic variable, the difference between the concerned period is converted into percentage form. For example, if a dairy farm owner produced 100 liters of milk last month and 105 liters in the following month, his dairy has a growth rate of 5% over a period of 2 months. Similarly, we may calculate the growth rate of an economy for any given successive periods. Growth rate is an annual concept which may be used otherwise with the clear reference to the period for which it is used. Though growth is a value-neutral term, i.e., it might be positive or negative for an economy for a specific period, we generally use it in the positive sense. If economists say an economy is growing, it means the economy is having a positive growth, otherwise they use the term negative growth. Economic growth is a widely used term in economics, which is useful in not only national-level economic analyses and policymaking, but also highly useful in the study of comparative economics. International-level financial and commercial institutions go for policymaking and future financial planning on the basis of the growth rate data available for the economies of the world. Economic development. For a comparatively longer period of time after the birth of economics, economists remained focused on aspects of expanding the quantity of production and income of a country's economy. The main issue economists discussed was how to increase the quantity of production and income of a country or a nation-state. It was believed that once an economy is able to increase its production, its income will also increase, and there will be an automatic betterment, quality increase, in the lives of the people of the economy. There was no conscious discussion over the issue of quality expansion in the lives of the people. Economic growth was considered as a cause and effect for the betterment of the lives of the people. This was the reason why economists, till the 1950s, failed to distinguish between growth and development, though they knew the difference between these terms. It was during the 1960s and in the later decades that economists came across many countries where the growth was comparatively higher, but the quality of life was comparatively low. The time had come to define economic development differently from what the world meant by economic growth. For economists, development indicates the quality of life in the economy, which might be seen in accordance with the availability of many variables such as 1. The level of nutrition, 2. The expansion and reach of healthcare facilities, hospitals, medicines, safe drinking water, vaccination, sanitation, etc. 3. The level of education, 4. Other variables on which the quality of life depends. Here, one basic thing must be kept in mind that if the masses are to be guaranteed with a basic minimum level of quality-enhancing inputs, above given variables such as food, health, education, etc., in their life, a minimum level of income has to be guaranteed for them. Income is generated from productive activities. It means that before assuring development, we need to assure growth. Higher economic development requires higher economic growth. But it does not mean that a higher economic growth automatically brings in higher economic development, a confusion the early economists failed to clarify. We may cite an example here to understand the confusion: two families having same levels of income, but spending differing amounts of money on developmental aspects. One might be giving little attention to health, education, and going for saving, and the other might not be saving, but taking possible care of the issues of health and education. Here the latter necessarily will have higher development in comparison to the former. Thus, we may have some diverse cases of growth and development. 1. Higher growth and higher development. 2. Higher growth, but lower development. 3. Lower growth, but higher development. The above given combinations, though comparative in nature, make one thing clear, that, just as for higher income and growth we need conscious efforts, same is true about economic development and higher economic development. Without a conscious public policy, development has not been possible anywhere in the world. Similarly, we can say that without growth there cannot be development either. The first such instance of growth without development, which the economists saw, was in the Gulf countries. These economies, though they had far higher levels of income and growth, the levels of development were not of comparable levels. Here started the branch of economics, which came to be known as development economics. After the arrival of the WB and IMF, conscious economic policies were framed and prescribed for the growth and development of less developed economies. We can say that economic development is quantitative as well as qualitative progress in an economy. It means, when we use the term growth we mean quantitative progress, and when we use the term development we mean quantitative as well as qualitative progress. If economic growth is suitably used for development, it comes back to accelerate the growth and ultimately greater and greater population brought under the arena of development. Similarly, high growth with low development and ill-cared development finally results in fall in growth. Thus, there is a circular relationship between growth and development. This circular relationship broke down when the Great Depression occurred. Once the concept of the welfare state got established, development became a matter of high concern for the governments of the world, policymakers and economists alike. A whole new branch of economics, welfare economics, has its origin in the concept of welfare state and the immediacy of development. Measuring development. Although economists were able to articulate the differences between growth and development, Mahbub-ul Haq, a leading Pakistani economist, had done it by the early 1970s, it took some more time when the right method of measuring development could be developed. It was an established fact that the goal of progress goes beyond the mere increase in income. International bodies such as the UNO, IMF, and WB were concerned about the development of the comparatively underdeveloped regions of the world. But any attempt in this direction was only possible once there was a tool to know and measure the level of development in an economy, and the determinants which could be considered as the traits of development. The idea of developing a formula/method to measure the development was basically facing two kinds of difficulties. 1. At one level it was difficult to define as to what constitutes development. Factors which could show development might be many, such as levels of income/consumption, quality of consumption, healthcare, nutrition, safe drinking water, literacy and education, social security, peaceful community life, availability of social prestige, entertainment, pollution-free environment, etc. It has been a really difficult task to achieve consensus among the experts on these determinants of development. 2. At the second level it looked highly difficult to quantify a concept as development constitutes quantitative as well as qualitative aspects. It is easy to compare qualitative aspects such as beauty, taste, etc., but to measure them we don't have any measuring scale. Human Development Index. The dilemma of measuring the developmental level of economies was solved once the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, published its first Human Development Report, HDR, in 1990. The report had a Human Development Index, HDI, which was the first attempt to define and measure the level of development of economies. The index was a product of select team of leading scholars, development practitioners, and members of the Human Development Report Office of the UNDP. The first such team which developed the HDI was led by Mahbub-ul-Haq and Inga Kaul. The term human development is a corollary of development in the index. The HDR measures development by combining three indicators: health, education, and standard of living, converted into a composite Human Development Index, the HDI. The creation of a single statistic in HDI was a real breakthrough, which was to serve as a frame of reference for both social and economic development. The HDI sets a minimum and a maximum for each dimension, called goalposts, and then shows where each country stands in relation to these goalposts, expressed as a value between 0 and 1, i.e., the index is prepared on the scale of 1. The three indicators used to develop the composite index are as given below. The education component of the HDI is now, since HDR 2010, measured by two other indicators. 1. Mean of years of schooling. For adults aged 25 years, this is estimated based on educational attainment data from censuses and surveys available in the UNESCO Institute for Statistics database and Barrow and Lee, 2010, methodology. 2. Expected years of schooling. For children of school entering age, these estimates are based on enrollment by age at all levels of education and population of official school age for each level of education. Expected years of schooling is capped at 18 years. These indicators are normalized using a minimum value of 0, and maximum values are set to the actual observed maximum value of mean years of schooling from the countries in the time series, 1980 to 2012, that is 13.3 years estimated for the United States in 2010. The Education Index is the geometric mean of two indices. The health component is measured by the life expectancy at birth component of the HDI, and is calculated using a minimum value of 20 years and maximum value of 83.57 years. This is the observed maximum value of the indicators from the countries in the time series, 1980 to 2012. Thus, the longevity component for a country where life expectancy birth is 55 years would be 0.551. The standard of living component is measured by GNI, gross national income/product, per capita at purchasing power parity in US dollars, PPP, of past. The goalpost taken for minimum income is 87,478, PPP, estimated for Qatar in 2012. The HDI uses the logarithm of income to reflect the diminishing importance of income with increasing GNI. The scores for the three HDI dimension indices are then aggregated into a composite index using geometric mean. The HDI facilitates instructive comparisons of the experiences within and between different countries. The UNDP ranked the economies in accordance of their achievements on the above given three parameters on the scale of 1, i.e., 0.000 to 1.000. As per their achievements, the countries were broadly classified into three categories with a range of points on the index. 1. High human development countries, 0.800 to 1.000 points on the index. 2. Medium human development countries, 0.500 to 0.799 points on the index. 3. Low human development countries, 0.000 to 0.499 points on the index. The Human Development Report 2019 is discussed in Chapter 20. The debate continues. Though the UNDP Commission team had evolved a consensus as to what constitutes development, academicians and experts around the world have been debating this issue. By 1995, economies around the world had officially accepted the concept of human development propounded by the UNDP. Basically, the UNDP-designed HDR was used by the World Bank since the 1990s to quantify the developmental efforts of the member countries, and cheap developmental funds were allocated in accordance. Naturally, the member countries started emphasizing on the parameters of income, education, and life expectancy in their policymaking, and in this way the idea of HDI got obligatory or voluntary acceptance around the world. For many years, experts and scholars came up with their own versions of defining development. They gave unequal weightage to the determinants defining development, as well as selected some completely different parameters, which could also denote development in a more suitable way. Since quality is a matter of value judgment and a normative concept, there was scope for this representation. Most of such attempts were not prescriptions for an alternative development index, but they were basically trying to show the incompleteness of the HDI via intellectual satires. One such attempt was made by economists and scholars of the London School of Economics in 1999, which concluded that Bangladesh was the most developed country in the world, with the USA, Norway, Sweden getting the lowest ranks in the index. Basically, it is very much possible to come out with such an index. As for example, we may say that peace of mind is a necessary element of development and betterment in human life, which depends heavily on the fact as to how much sleep we get every day. House theft and burglary are major determinants of a good night's sleep, which in turn depends on the fact as how assured we go to sleep in our homes at night from burglars and thieves. It means we may try to know a good sleep by the data of thefts and burglaries in homes. Since minor house thefts and burglaries are underreported in police stations, the surveyor, suppose, tried to know such cases with data as how many locks were sold in a country in a particular year. In this way, a country where people hardly have anything to be stolen, or no risk of being burgled, might be considered having the best sleep in night, thus the best peace of mind, and that is why this will be the most developed country. Basically, the HDI could be considered as one possible ways of measuring development, which was evolved by the concerned group of experts with the maximum degree of consensus. But the index which calculates the development of economies on certain parameters might be overlooking many other important factors which affect the development of an economy and standard of living. As per experts, such other determinants affecting our living conditions might be 1. Cultural aspects of the economy, 2. Outlook towards aesthetics and purity of the environment, 3. Aspects related to the rule and administration in the economy, 4. People's idea of happiness and prestige, 5. Ethical dimension of human life, etc. Introspecting development. Confusion about the real meaning of development started only after the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund came into being. As experts were studying the development process of the developing world, they were also surveying the performance reports of the developed world. As the Western world came to be regarded as developed, having top 20 ranks on the HDI, social scientists started evaluating the conditions of life in these economies. Most of such studies concluded that life in the developed world is anything but happy. Crime, corruption, burglaries, extortion, drug trafficking, flesh trade, rape, homicide, moral degradation, sexual perversion, etc., all kinds of the so-called vices, were thriving in the developed world. It means development had failed to deliver them happiness, peace of mind, a general well-being, and a feeling of being in good state. Scholars started questioning the very efforts being made for development around the world. Most of them have suggested a need of redefining development, which could deliver happiness to mankind. Why has development not delivered happiness to the developed world? The answer to this question does not lie in any one objective fact, but touches so many areas of human life. First, whenever economists from the outset talked about progress, they meant overall happiness of human life. Social scientists somehow have been using terms such as progress, growth, development, well-being, welfare as synonyms of happiness. Happiness is a normative concept as well as a state of mind. Therefore, its idea might vary from one economy to the other. Second, the period in which development was defined, it was considered that with the supply of some selected material resources human life can be improved. These resources were pinpointed as a better level of income, proper level of nutrition, healthcare facilities, proper levels of literacy and education, etc. Happiness is a broader thing than development. The so-called development for which the world has been striving hard for the last many decades is capable of delivering material happiness to mankind. Happiness has its non-material side also. It means, while the world has been trying to maximize its prospects of development, i.e., material happiness, it could not attend the non-material part of happiness. The non-material part of our life is rooted in ethics, religion, spiritualism, and cultural values. As development or human development was defined in material terms, it could only deliver us material happiness, which is visibly available in the developed world. Due to partial definition of development, the developed world has been able to achieve development, i.e., happiness, but only of material kind. For the non-material part of happiness, we need to redefine our ideas of development. Somehow a very small kingdom had been able to define development in its own way, which included material as well as non-material aspects of life, and named it the Gross National Happiness, GNH. This country is Bhutan. Gross National Happiness, Bhutan, a small Himalayan kingdom, and an economic non-entity, developed a new concept of assessing development in the early 1970s, the Gross National Happiness, GNH. Without rejecting the idea of human development propounded by UNDP, the kingdom has been officially following the targets set by the GNH. Bhutan has been following the GNH since 1972, which has the following parameters to attain happiness/development. 1. Higher real per capita income. 2. Good governance. 3. Environmental protection. 4. Cultural promotion, i.e., inculcation of ethical and spiritual values in life without which, it says, progress may become a curse rather than a blessing. At the level of real per capita income, the GNH and the HDI are the same. Though the HDI is silent on the issue of good governance, today it should be considered as being promoted around the world once the World Bank came with its report on it in 1995 and enforced it upon the member states. On the issue of protecting environment, though the HDI didn't say anything directly, the World Bank and the UNO had already accepted the immediacy of sustainable development by then, and by early 1990s there was a separate UN convention on the matter. Follow-up on this convention has been really very low till date, which is a different issue. It means the basic difference between the GNH and the HDI looks at the level of assimilating the ethical and spiritual aspects into our, UNDP's, idea of development. An impartial analysis sufficiently suggests that material achievements are unable to deliver us happiness devoid of some ethics at its base. And ethics are rooted in the religious and spiritual texts. But the new world is guided by its own scientific and secular interpretation of life, and the world has always been suspicious about recognizing the spiritual factor in human life. Rather, the Western idea of secularism was defined after rejecting the very existence of anything like God, and also rejecting the whole traditional hypothesis of spiritualism as instances of ignorance and orthodoxy. And there should not be any doubt in accepting it that the Western ideology, in the name of development, has ultimately dominated the modern world and its way of life. The idea of development, which was followed by a large part of the world, has been % this worldly. And anybody can assess today what kind of happiness the world has been able to achieve in the end. A recent study by a senior economist from the UNDP on the Bhutanese development experience under the GNH has vindicated the idea of gross happiness, which development must result into. As per the study, the period 1984 to 98 has been spectacular in terms of development, with life expectancy increasing by a hopping 19 years, gross school enrollment reaching 72% and literacy touching 47.5%, from just 17%. After the terror attack on the World Trade Center in the USA, the whole world has gone for a psychic metamorphosis, and at least the euphoria of development from this world to that world has been shaken from its very base. The world, which is in the process of globalization, at one hand has started introspecting whether multicultural coexistence is possible. The Human Development Report of 2004 was titled as Cultural Liberty in Today's Diverse World. We may conclude that mankind is passing through a phase of serious introspection and transition, where the dominant view in the world may metamorphose into redefining the very idea of development by including ethical values and spiritualism as important parts. But till now, the proponents of development look a bit shy in believing and accepting wholeheartedly that there exists a non-material part of life, which needs to be realized to make our development result into happiness. Happiness. The World Happiness Report 2020 was released on March 20, 2020, the International Day of Happiness. The 156-nation report, though only 153 nations have been ranked, 8th in the series, no report was published in 2014, ranks nations on the basis of reported happiness by their citizens. Aimed at guiding public policy of the nations, the report measures and ranks the nations on the basis of the following 6 variables. 1. GDP per capita, at PPP. 2. Social support, someone to count on. 3. Healthy life expectancy at birth. 4. Freedom to make life choices. 5. Generosity. 6. Perception of corruption. Major highlights: the top 10 happiest countries with their ranks in 2019 given in brackets following their names are: 1st Finland, 1, 2nd Denmark, 2nd, 3rd Switzerland, 6th, 4th Iceland, 4th, 5th Norway, 3rd, 6th the Netherlands, 5th, 7th Sweden, 7th, 8th New Zealand, 8th, 9th Luxembourg, 14th, and 10th Austria, 10th. In this year's report captured the 9th rank by pushing Canada down to rank 14th. Countries ranked from 11th to 20th with their ranks in 2019 given in brackets following their names are: 11th Canada, 9th, 12th Australia, 11th, 13th United Kingdom, 15th, 14th Israel, 13th, 15th Costa Rica, 12th, 16th Ireland, 16th, 17th Germany, 17th, 18th USA, 19th, 18th Czech Republic, 20th, and 20th Belgium, 18th. The bottom 3 least happy countries are those afflicted by violent conflicts and extreme poverty: Zimbabwe, 151, South Sudan, 152, and Afghanistan, 153, ranked the last. India-specific highlights: India is ranked 144th, for ranks lower than the report of 2019. India has lost ranks almost every year since the report is published, from 111th in 2013 to 117th in 2015, 118th in 2016, 122nd in 2017, 133rd in 2018, 140 in 2019. For that matter, fall in ranks has been seen in case of several developed countries also, notably, not caused by economic, but social reasons. India ranks lower than all of its neighbors: Pakistan, 66, Nepal, 92, Bangladesh, 107, and Sri Lanka, 130. All nations in BRICS are better ranked than India: Brazil, 32, Russia, 73, China, 94, Africa, 109. India is ranked with the least happy nations in the world with Afghanistan, South Sudan, Zimbabwe, Rwanda, Central African Republic, Tanzania, Botswana, Yemen, and Malawi. India is among world's 5 nations where the largest drops in ranks have been seen since 2008 to 2012. Other 4 nations are Venezuela, Afghanistan, Lesotho, and Zambia. Life evaluations have been sharply declining in case of India. While in case of current life evaluation Delhi is ranked 180th, in case of future life evaluation it is ranked 182nd, out of a total of 186 cities taken from the world. Some other peer cities are ranked in case of current life evaluation are Karachi, 117th, Lahore, 122nd, Beijing, 134th, Colombo, 170th, Baghdad, 163rd, Myanmar, 165th, and Kabul, 186th. Special focus. The special focus for this year's report is environments, as how the social, urban, and natural environments combine to affect our happiness. Walking in green spaces makes people happy, but especially so if they are with a friend. Cities clearly play an important role in economic growth, but as populations keep migrating from rural to urban areas, the strain on resources need to be understood. Together with studying happiness across cities, the report compares the happiness of urban dwellers to their rural counterparts in the same country. Generally, we find that the average happiness of city residents is more often than not higher than the average happiness of the general country population, especially in countries at the lower end of economic development. But this urban happiness advantage evaporates, and sometimes turns negative for cities in high-income countries, suggesting that the search for happiness may well be more fruitful when looking to live in more rural areas. Ranks of cities. In addition to the country rankings, the World Happiness Report 2020 for the first time ranks cities around the world by their subjective well-being. It may come as no surprise, the happiest city in the world is Helsinki, the capital of Finland. In general, the happiness ranking of cities is almost identical to that of the countries in which they are located. Finland's top spot in the happiness list has previously been met with raised eyebrows in the country, whose population of 55 lakh is said to shy away from spontaneous demonstrations of joy, valuing instead the quiet and solitude of the country's vast forests and thousands of lakes. The long dark winters of the country was considered the cause behind high levels of alcoholism and suicide, but a decade-long public health drive has helped cut rates by more than half. People of the country enjoy a high quality of life, security and public services, with rates of inequality and poverty among the lowest of all OECD countries. Coronavirus. The data for WHR 2020 was collected in 2018 and 2019, thus it is not impacted by the widespread restrictions imposed by many countries to check the spread of the novel coronavirus, COVID-19. However, the team of editors passed some very interesting comments in this regard. They predicted that the lockdown conditions many of the world's residents are now living under could, paradoxically, boost happiness in future. The most frequent explanation seems to be that people are pleasantly surprised by the willingness of their neighbors and their institutions to work in harness to help each other. In this reference, one of the editors, Jeffrey Sachs, said, "Happiness will not vaccinate these countries against the new virus, nor are the health systems by themselves able to cope. Social distancing, self-isolation, quarantine is need of the hour together with strong and effective governments and implementation." People in isolation coming out onto their balconies to applaud health and emergency workers is a symbol of social support. Where a nation's social fabric is not strong, then fear, disappointment, and anger add to the happiness cost of a disaster. As concluding remarks, it will be better to quote few of the editors of the report. Jeffrey Sachs, "Time and again we see the reasons for well-being include good social support networks, social trust, honest governments, safe environments, and healthy lives." The World Happiness Report has proven to be an indispensable tool for policymakers looking to better understand what makes people happy. In contrast, the situation in the United States is chaotic, which reflects low trust of government and low performance and expectations of government by the public. The country is thoroughly unprepared. John Helliwell, "The happiest countries are those where people feel a sense of belonging, where they trust and enjoy each other and their shared institutions. There is also more resilience, because shared trust reduces the burden of hardships, and thereby lessens the inequality of well-being." The meaning of happiness. The word happiness is quite complex and is not used lightly. Happiness is an aspiration of every human being, and can also be a measure of social progress. Yet, are the citizens of different countries happy? If they are not, what, if anything, can be done about it? The key to proper measurement must begin with the meaning of the word happiness. As per the WHR 2013, the problem, of course, is that happiness is used in at least two ways. 1. As an emotion, were you happy yesterday? And 2. As an evaluation, are you happy with your life as a whole? If individuals were to routinely mix up their responses to these very different questions, then measures of happiness might tell us very little. Changes in reported happiness used to track social progress would perhaps reflect little more than transient changes in emotion. Or impoverished persons who express happiness in terms of emotion might inadvertently diminish society's will to fight poverty. Fortunately, respondents to the happiness surveys do not tend to make such confusing mistakes. Both the WHRs did show that the respondents of the surveys clearly recognize the difference between happiness as an emotion and happiness in the sense of life satisfaction. The responses of individuals to these different questions are highly distinct. A very poor person might report himself to be happy emotionally at a specific time, while also reporting a much lower sense of happiness with life as a whole. And indeed, people living in extreme poverty do express low levels of happiness with life as a whole. Such answers should spur our societies to work harder to end extreme poverty. The WHR is based on the primary measures of subjective well-being, life evaluations, life satisfaction, and happiness with life as a whole. Thus, happiness appears twice, once as an emotional report, and once as part of a life evaluation, giving considerable evidence about the nature and causes of happiness in both its major senses. The background. In July 2011, the UN General Assembly passed a historic resolution. It invited member countries to measure the happiness of their people, and to use this to help guide their public policies. This was followed in April 2012 by the first UN high-level meeting on happiness and well-being, chaired by the Prime Minister of Bhutan. At the same time, the first World Happiness Report was published, followed some months later by the OECD guidelines setting an international standard for the measurement of well-being. Reimagining the idea of happiness. Search for a happier life for humanity has been the ultimate aim of not only saints, seers and philosophers, but of economists too. The whole gamut of economics literature on progress, growth and development is ultimately aimed at bringing more happiness into the lives of human beings. Over the time, diverse ideological currents impressed upon the humanity to take variety of meanings out of the highly subjective term happiness, and finally, the humanity is where it is today. A time also came when many scholars and world leaders raised the ultimate question, are we happier today? And in the wake of this increased scrutiny around the world, there came the UN resolution of 2011, which invited member countries to measure the happiness of their people and to use this to help guide their public policies. The WHR 2012 itself provides a very interesting and eye-opening inquiry into the state of human happiness in the world. To understand the shift which is expected to take place among policymakers around the world in coming years, it will be better to lift some ideas from the first WHR. 1. This is an age of stark contradictions. While at the one hand the world enjoys technologies of unimaginable sophistication, at the other hand, at least 1 billion people are living without enough to eat. The world economy is propelled to soaring new heights of productivity through ongoing technological and organizational advances, yet it is relentlessly destroying the natural environment in the process. Countries achieve great progress in economic development as conventionally measured, yet along the way countries succumb to new crises of obesity, smoking, diabetes, depression, and other ills of modern life. These contradictions would not come as a shock to the greatest sages of humanity, including Aristotle and the Buddha, who taught humanity, time and again, that material gain alone will not fulfill our deepest needs. Material life must be harnessed to meet these human needs, most importantly to promote the end of suffering, social justice, and the attainment of happiness. 2. The WHR 2012 took key examples from the USA, the world's economic superpower, which has achieved striking economic and technological progress over the past half-century without gains in the self-reported happiness of the citizenry with the following serious concerns of today. A. Uncertainties and anxieties are high. B. Social and economic inequalities have widened considerably. C. Social trust is in decline. And D. Confidence in government is at an all-time low. Perhaps for these reasons, life satisfaction in the USA has remained nearly constant during the decades of rising gross national product, GNP, per capita. 3. The realities of poverty, anxiety, environmental degradation, and unhappiness in the midst of great plenty should not be regarded as mere curiosities. They require our urgent attention, and especially so at this juncture in human history. For we have entered a new phase of the world, termed the Anthropocene. By the world's Earth system scientists. The Anthropocene will necessarily reshape our societies. If we continue mindlessly along the current economic trajectory, we risk undermining the Earth's life support systems, food supplies, clean water and stable climate, necessary for human health, and even survival in some places. In years or decades, conditions of life may become dire in several fragile regions of the world. We are already experiencing deterioration of life support systems in the dry lands of the Horn of Africa and parts of Central Asia. On the other hand, if we act wisely, we can protect the Earth while raising quality of life broadly around the world. We can do this by adopting lifestyles and technologies that improve happiness or life satisfaction and reduce human damage to the environment. Sustainable development is the term given to the combination of human well-being, social inclusion, and environmental sustainability. There is no doubt in concluding that the quest for happiness is intimately linked to the quest for sustainable development. 4. In an impoverished society, the urge for material gain typically makes a lot of sense. Higher household income, or higher per capita GNP, generally signifies an improvement in the life conditions of the poor. The poor suffer from dire deprivations of various kinds, lack of adequate food supplies, remunerative jobs, access to health care, safe homes, safe water and sanitation, and educational opportunities. As incomes rise from very low levels, human well-being improves. Not surprisingly, the poor report a rising satisfaction with their lives as their meager incomes increase. On the opposite end of the income spectrum, for most individuals in the high-income world, the basic deprivations have been vanquished. There is enough food, shelter, basic amenities, such as clean water and sanitation, and clothing to meet their daily needs. In fact, there is a huge surfeit of amenities above basic needs. Poor people would swap with rich people in a heartbeat. Yet all is not well. The conditions of affluence have created their own set of traps. Most importantly, the lifestyles of the rich imperil the survival of the poor. Human-induced climate change is already hitting the poorest regions and claiming lives and livelihoods. It is telling that in much of the rich world, affluent populations are so separated from the poor that there is little recognition, practical or moral, of the adverse spillovers, or externalities, from their own behavior. 5. Affluence has also created its own set of afflictions and addictions, problems, obesity, adult-onset diabetes, tobacco-related illnesses, eating disorders such as anorexia and bulimia, psychosocial disorders, and addictions to shopping, TV and gambling, are all examples of disorders of development. So too is the loss of community, the decline of social trust, and the rising anxiety levels associated with the vagaries of the modern globalized economy, including the threats of unemployment, or episodes of illness not covered by health insurance in the United States, and many other countries. 6. Higher average incomes do not necessarily improve average well-being, the U.S. being a clear case in point, as noted famously by Professor Richard Easterlin, where GNP per capita has risen by a factor of 3 since 1960, while measures of average happiness have remained essentially unchanged over the half-century. The increased U.S. output has caused massive environmental damages, notably through greenhouse gas concentrations and human-induced climate change, without doing much at all to raise the well-being even of Americans. Thus, we don't have a trade-off between short-run gains to well-being versus long-run costs to the environment. We have a pure loss to the environment, without offsetting short-term gains. The paradox that Easterlin noted in the U.S. was that at any particular time richer individuals are happier than poorer ones, but over time the society did not become happier as it became richer. This is due to 4 reasons. A. Individuals compare themselves to others. They are happier when they are higher on the social, or income, ladder. Yet when everybody rises together, relative status remains unchanged. B. The gains have not been evenly shared, but have gone disproportionately to those at the top of the income and education distribution. C. The other societal factors, insecurity, loss of social trust, declining confidence in government, have counteracted any benefits felt from higher incomes. D. Individuals may experience an initial jump in happiness when their income rises, but then at least partly return to earlier levels as they adapt to their new higher income. 7. These phenomena put a clear limit on the extent to which rich countries can become happier through the simple device of economic growth. In fact, there are still other general reasons to doubt the formula of ever-rising GNP per person as the route to happiness. While higher income may raise happiness to some extent, the quest for higher income may actually reduce one's happiness. In other words, it may be nice to have more money, but not so nice to crave for it. Psychologists have found repeatedly that individuals who put a high premium on higher incomes generally are less happy and more vulnerable to other psychological ills than individuals who do not crave higher incomes. Aristotle and the Buddha advised humanity to follow a middle path between asceticism on the one side and craving material goods on the other. 8. Another problem is the creation of new material wants through the incessant advertising of products using powerful imagery and other means of persuasion. Since the imagery is ubiquitous on all of our digital devices, the stream of advertising is more relentless than ever before. Advertising is now a business of around US $500 billion per year. Its goal is to overcome satiety by creating wants and longings where none previously existed. Advertisers and marketers do this in part by preying on psychological weaknesses and unconscious urges. Cigarettes, caffeine, sugar, and trans fats all cause cravings if not outright addictions. Fashions are sold through increasingly explicit sexual imagery. Product lines are generally sold by associating the products with high social status rather than with real needs. 9. The thinking of becoming happier by becoming richer is challenged by the law of diminishing marginal utility of income. After a certain point, the gains are very small. This means that poor people benefit far more than rich people from an added dollar of income. This is a good reason why tax and transfer systems among high-income OECD countries on balance take in net revenues from high-income households and make net transfers to low-income households. Put another way, the inequality of household income is systematically lower with net of taxes and transfers than before taxes and transfers. 10. The Western economists' logic of ever higher GNP is built on a vision of humanity completely at variance with the wisdom of the sages, the research of psychologists, and the practices of advertisers. Economists assume that individuals are rational decision-makers who know what they want and how to get it, or to get as close to it as possible, given their budget. Individuals care largely about themselves and derive pleasure mainly through their consumption. The individual's preferences as consumers are a given or change in ways actually anticipated in advance by the individuals themselves. Some economists even say that drug addicts have acted rationally, consciously trading off the early benefits of drug use with the later high toll of addiction. 11. We understand that we need a very different model of humanity, one in which we experienced complicated interplay of emotions and rational thought, unconscious and conscious decision-making, fast and slow thinking. Many of our decisions are led by emotions and instincts, and only later rationalized by conscious thought. Our decisions are easily primed by associations, imagery, social context, and advertising. We are inconsistent or irrational in sequential choices, failing to meet basic standards of rational consistency. And we are largely unaware of our own mental apparatus, so we easily fall into traps and mistakes. Addicts do not anticipate their future pain. We spend now and suffer the consequences of bankruptcy later. We break our diets now because we aren't thinking clearly about the consequences. We also understand, again, that we are social animals through and through. We learn through imitation, and gain our happiness through meeting social norms, and having a sense of belonging to the community. 12. Human beings feel the pain of others, and react viscerally when others are sad or injured. We even have a set of mirror neurons that enable us to feel things from the point of view of others. All of this gives us a remarkable capacity to cooperate even with strangers, and even when there is little chance of reward or reciprocity, and to punish non-cooperators, even when imposing punishment on others is costly or puts us at risk. Of course, there are limits to such cooperation and fellow feeling. We also cheat, bluff, deceive, break our word, and kill members of an outgroup. We engage in identity politics, acting as cruel to outsiders as we are loving to our own group. All these lessons of human nature matter more than ever, more even than when the Buddha taught humanity about the illusions of transient pleasures, and the Greeks warned us against the tempting siren songs that could pull us off our life's course. For today we have more choices than ever before. In the ancient world, the choice facing most of humanity most of the time was little choice indeed, to work hard to secure enough to eat, and even then to face the risk of famine and death from bad weather or bad luck. 13. Today, we face a set of real choices. Should the world pursue GNP to the point of environmental ruin, even when incremental gains in GNP are not increasing much, or at all, the happiness of affluent societies? Should we crave for higher personal income at the cost of the community and social trust? Should our governments spend even a tiny fraction of the $500 billion spent on advertising each year to help individuals and families to understand better their own motivations, wants and needs as consumers? Should we consider some parts of our society to be off bounds to the profit motive, so that we can foster the spirit of cooperation, trust and community? A recent analyst of Finland's school system, for example, writes that Finland's excellence, ranking near the top of international comparisons in student performance, has been achieved by fostering a spirit of community and equality in the schools. This is in sharp contrast to the education reform strategy at work in the US, where the emphasis is to put on testing, measurement, and teacher pay according to student test performance. Insights into human behavior. The World Bank in its report, World Development Report 2015, Mind, Society, and Behavior, said that development policies become more effective when combined with insights into human behavior. It further adds that policy decisions informed by behavioral economics can deliver impressive improvements in promoting development and well-being in society. It cites some examples from India in the areas of healthcare and education. Open defecation dropped 11% from very high levels after a community-led total sanitation (CLTS) program was combined in some chosen villages with the standard approach of subsidies for toilet construction and information on the transmission of diseases. The likelihood of default on loans became 3 times less with a simple change in the periodicity of meetings between microfinance clients and their repayment groups to weekly rather than monthly. Research showed that boys from backward classes were just as good at solving puzzles as boys from the upper castes when caste identity was not revealed. However, in mixed caste groups, revealing the boys' castes before puzzle-solving sessions created a significant caste gap in achievement, with the boys from backward classes underperforming by 23%, making caste salient to the test takers' invoked identities, which in turn affected performance, as per the report. The report has recommended that the presence of a stereotype can contribute to measured ability differences, which in turn reinforce the stereotype and serve as a basis for exclusion. In a vicious cycle, finding ways to break this cycle could increase the well-being of marginalized individuals enormously. Social norms, culture and development. Economic development is not only dependent on fiscal policy, monetary policy and taxation, but is also rooted in human psychology, sociology, culture and norms. In economics, there has been a bit of resistance in emphasizing other aspects of development, because it is thought of giving ground to the neighboring disciplines. The World Development Report, WDR, of 2015 focuses on the behavioral and social foundations of development, and has been very well received. Government documents, generally, hard-nosed, usually, make no mention of the role of social norms and culture in promoting development and economic efficiency. However, there is now a growing body of literature that demonstrates how certain social norms and cultural practices are vital ingredients for economic efficiency and growth. Groups and societies that are known to be honest and trustworthy tend to do better than societies that do not have this reputation. There have been broad cross-country studies and also laboratory experiments that illustrate this. More generally, what is being argued is that a nation's success depends, of course, on its resources, human capital and economic policies, for instance fiscal and monetary policies, but also on the cultural and social norms that permeate the society. Societies that are endowed with personal integrity and trustworthiness have the natural advantage, in that no third party is required to enforce contracts. For outsiders, the mere knowledge that a particular society is trustworthy is reason to do more business and trade with it. One reason why these social causes of development do not get enough recognition in the literature on economic policy is that the science of how these economics-friendly social qualities are acquired is not yet fully understood. Fortunately, the new discipline of behavioral economics is beginning to give us some insights into the formation of customs and behavior. It is, for instance, known that buildings and office spaces, which are cleaner and aesthetically better maintained, result in individuals being more honest and desisting corrupt activity. It is almost as if we have a mental inclination not to defile a good ambience through acts of corruption. New York City's notorious high crime was controlled, among other things, by cleaning up the city and removing graffiti from the walls. New York's police department took a decision to deter vandalism and graffiti that scar public spaces. This act of making the cityscape more aesthetic somehow made potential criminals less prone to crime. One sees casual evidence of this in the behavior of Delhi-tes using the metro. It has been widely noted that people behave better when they travel on Delhi's well-maintained metro, postponing their bad behavior to when they come up to the surface again, some would add. All this is in keeping with the influential broken windows theory in sociology, which maintains that, if we control low-level, antisocial behavior, and take small steps to improve the environment, this will have a natural deterrent effect on larger criminal behavior and acts of corruption. Also, the sheer recognition and awareness that some collective qualities of citizens, such as honesty and trustworthiness, enable the entire society to do well, prompts individuals to adopt those qualities and overcome the ubiquitous free rider problem. There is a growing literature in economics arguing that prosocial behavior, which includes altruism and trustworthiness, is innate to human beings and, moreover, forms an essential ingredient for the efficient functioning of economies. In other words, human beings have a natural ability to forego personal gains for the sake of other people, or because that is what is required, because of a promise the person had made. This trait may well have evolutionary roots, but its existence is now well demonstrated in laboratory tests by recent studies. Values and economics. There is research in psychology and evolutionary biology which shows that morality, altruism, and other regarding values are an innate part of the human mind, even though the social setting in which a person lives can nurture or stunt these traits. However, the recognition that these human and moral qualities can have a large impact on economic development came relatively late to economics. Hence, the literature on this is relatively recent and brief. In fact, recent research shows that having a few good human beings in society can give rise to dynamics through which we end up with an overall better society. There is also evidence that social norms and habits that at first sight seem ingrained in a society can change over short periods of time. By this argument, it is possible for a country to nurture and develop the kinds of social norms that enable a more vibrant economy. In talking about a nation's economic progress, all attention, including both praise and criticism, is usually focused on the government. It is, however, important to recognize that much also depends on civil society, the firms, the farmers, and ordinary citizens. The social norms and collective beliefs that shape the behavior of these agents play an important role in how a nation performs. Honesty, punctuality, the propensity to keep promises, the attitude towards corruption are matters shaped in great part by norms and social beliefs, and the behavior patterns can become habitual. Moreover, in a democracy like India, what can be done by government depends in great measure on how ordinary people think and what people believe in. That is what electoral politics is all about. An important reason why this got so little attention in the past is because so much of traditional economics was written as if these non-economic facets of life did not matter. But we now know that a market economy cannot function if people are totally self-serving. While self-interest is a major driver of economic growth, it is important to recognize that honesty, integrity and trustworthiness constitute the cement that binds society. At times economists treated these social norms, preferences and customs as unalterable. If that were so, there would not be much point in analyzing their effect. But we do know that these qualities in a people can change. Honesty and integrity can be nurtured and aversion to corruption can be shored up. Nudge in public policy. Behavioral economics provides insights to nudge people towards desirable behavior. By now, nudge has been successfully used in India as an instrument of public policy in the Swachh Bharat Mission, SBM, and Beti Bachao Beti Padhao, BBBP, campaigns, and it can be further used to aim even higher goals such as 1. From BBBP to Badlav, Beti Apki Dan Lakshmi or Vijay Lakshmi, 2. From Swachh Bharat to Sundar Bharat, 3. From Give It Up, for the LPG subsidy, to think about the subsidy, and 4. From tax evasion to tax compliance. Nudges can be used in policy making with effective outcomes by taking the following 3 policy actions. 1. People's behavior is influenced by social and religious norms. Thus, beneficial norms can be used as positive influencers, friends and neighbors as role models, to modify people's behavior. 2. As people have an inclination to go for default option in their actions, changing the default can be a very effective policy. 3. Policy of reminders and repeated reinforcements help sustain change in behavior as people find it difficult to sustain good habits. Common people fail to connect to policy actions of the governments. For an effective use of nudges in public policy, it is essential to relate economics to common person using something that he or she encounters every day, for example, a plate of food.